Hello, everyone. I know that Mardu normally introduces these podcasts, but I'm afraid that he's not with us today, all to do with girlfriend shenanigans, etc. But I'm here with the guys from Antimaterial Worlds for our podcasts number 20. It's absolutely great. How are you both? You good?
Oh, doing great. All things considered, we had a late night last night. We played a show and went really late, so I was kind of worried about how I was going to be feeling when it was time to do the podcast, but it was great.
And you say that so you're in Austin, Texas at the moment. So and you said you've just been to a program as well this afternoon. It's I think is it kind of 3 o'clock your time, isn't it?
Yeah, yep, 3 o'clock.
Mm. So, um, can you begin by just introducing yourselves, who you are, where you're from?
Yeah, my name is Jordan. I've lived in LA for about 7 years,
Mm.
and I'm originally from Akron, Ohio. Um, but I went to college in Columbus, Ohio, and that's probably the first time I met Gora, maybe like 11 years ago. So, yeah, but I play
Right. Okay.
guitar and co-produce some of the songs in the Antimaterial world.
Right. Thank you.
And I'm Gaura-Jivana Dāsa. And what else am I supposed to say?
A little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I guess I've been living in Los Angeles for the past like 3 years or so, and yeah, I like do vocals and some of the like the make some of the beats in Antimaterial Worlds. And then we also have a drummer who might be joining this Zoom if he can find some time. So he might just drop in at some point.
Good stuff. Um, could you tell us a little bit about I mean, we'll talk about music in a little bit, but how you guys first came across Krishna consciousness. So you both devotees, and is your drummer a devotee as well?
No, I'm not a devotee, but I am fully interested in it.
He's
Like,
Krishna curious.
yeah, that's where I'm at. I've gone to some services with Gora, and the one we just got back from today was like extremely thought-provoking, to be honest. But no, I don't identify as.
That's the true sign of a devotee.
Not identifying as one.
Yeah, how did I come into contact with Krishna consciousness?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I first met the devotees 23 years ago when I was 13 in Kansas City, where I grew up. I had recently gotten into straight edge hardcore, and um, I was into political activism as well. Like a lot of the causes of that time were like around like anti-globalization movements and freedom for political prisoners like Mumia Abu Jamal and Leonard Peltier, who are both still incarcerated. And I met this devotee who saw me out skateboarding I was either wearing a Void t-shirt or I was wearing a Youth of Today t-shirt. And he came up and I was 13 and he must have been about 18 or 19. And he was like, oh, like, are you straight edge? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, that's cool, man. Like, I was straight edge before I joined the temple. And then he was like, so are you vegetarian? And I was like, no. And he was like, oh, well, you're like, because we had talked a little bit, and he was like, oh, you're into all these like political causes and stuff, this activism, but it seems like, you would be into animal rights if you knew this. Yeah, I guess I've never really thought about that. And then he was like, went on to speak about how when you go to the grocery store and you see meat in the grocery store, it's like nicely packaged and it's like all designed to make you not have to think about the suffering, that animal experienced, and the fact that that animal is an individual that has a personality and has a family and like fought for its life so its last breath, like didn't want to die, didn't need to die, and then gave me a copy of The Higher Taste. And that really like, that was like a pretty big moment for me. But at that point in my life, I was very much a staunch atheist. So I liked the devotees and I read Srila Prabhupada's books, but I couldn't, the whole God thing, I was just like not into, but I mean, I would talk to the devotees whenever I saw them around, after that day. But it wouldn't be until like 15 years later that I really kind of took to the process of devotional service. So it's like the short version.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there are a couple of things you've really picked up there. That my next question was about, were you religious before you became a devotee, and did you believe in God beforehand? And so you there you were, you're an atheist. And what was it about the Hare Krishnas, do you think? I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I like, for what someone like Ray Capo says, or so some of the guys from 108, Robert Fish says, look, there was a whole system with the Hare Krishnas. Everything is in there, from the cosmology to the morals to philosophy. There's everything covered,
So yeah, so the question is like, why is this what resonates with me about Christian consciousness? Or so I guess, I mean, so that would, go into why I was an atheist, is I was forced to go to Catholic school my whole life, starting in kindergarten. Not because my parents were religious necessarily, but more because the public schools where I grew up lost their accreditation when I was pretty young. So that meant that graduating from a public high school where I grew up, the diploma wasn't recognized by any out-of-state college. So it's like basically pointless. So pretty much they had all these like voucher systems. Like if you couldn't afford to go to a private school, they were mostly Catholic schools, then the government would help figure out how to like cover that in the tuition. And like most people would try to go to Catholic schools. But I was kind of just like forced into this weird paradigm where this religion was like kind of just forced on me, and the whole concept of God being like this judgmental person in the sky who's going to condemn you to hell for an eternity if you like make a mistake just never like caught hold of me. I just never accepted it, and I always thought it was just like nonsense. And basically there's like a whole backstory that I could go into, but essentially when I was 28, so 8 years ago, I had, I was on tour playing music for a decade from 2005 to 2015, playing music and noise, and had like picked up some bad habits. And in 2015 decided it was like time to kind of like live a healthier life. So I went vegan again. I'd stopped being vegan. Went vegan again. I like sobered up, stopped drinking, stopped like, doing all that stuff. And then I was like, okay, so, and started running. So I had these two elements of a healthy lifestyle. And then I was like, I knew like consciously, like the third element that's missing is like some spiritual practice, to kind of just like bring it all together and ground me. And so then I started like searching again, and and just, I mean, I was reading all kinds of books. I was reading like autobiography of a yogi, and Ram Dass, Be Here Now, Eckhart Tolle stuff, all kinds of stuff, and Srila Prabhupada's books, and just basically like what you said is that it answers all your questions. That's like the point that you were kind of making earlier. And I felt like this makes a lot of sense. This concept of God being like all loving and not being judgmental of you, and just the philosophy is like so deep, and I think like it's just it's revolutionary for someone who grows up, especially someone who grows up in the West, to hear this concept of God that's like a friendly, like naughty little baby. It's like, you know, like, because we're so used to this like culture of like God fearing, and it's like fear of God is not a part of Krishna consciousness at all. Like it's all about sweetness. Like the Aishwarya Bhav is like not really a part. It's not an essential part of Krishna consciousness at all. It's all about the Nitya, you know. So I guess that's another long answer to your question. The sweetness, you know.
So you came towards Krishna conscious then. Was it through a kind of a punk avenue, or was it more? I mean, like, you know, yeah, you were in bands such as Sewn Leather and Skull Catalogue, and as you say, you know, you've said before we started that you were a bit of like a kind of a noise artist. Was it, you know, in that kind of space as a noise artist, were you kind of trying to find that kind of spirituality as well?
No, I mean, so it's funny that we're like talking about this like at the start of the interview, because the program that we were just at, someone had this very like amazing question that was kind of, they were new like to the devotees, and he was kind of asking about like the role that plant medicine plays, if any role, you know, with devotees, if like basically just he's meeting all these people and he's like exploring different spiritual avenues, and it kind of like it reminded me that like the moment that I can pinpoint the moment that I went from being an atheist to like an actively seeking agnostic, and it was like the moment that I had an experience with psilocybin, and I guess basically like I had this realization that it's not God that I have a problem with. It's the people that are claiming to represent God and are doing a really bad job of representing God. And that was when I was like 21 or 22. And that's when I really like that's when I just was like able to accept the concept of God. And it was also kind of in the midst of being like involved in the noise scene and like the hardcore scene and the metal scene. So I mean, my initial contact obviously was with that devotee who saw me out wearing a Void shirt, and we connected on that level. And also, that was in the year 2000 when I met him, and I remember he was like, "Oh, like, do you listen to Cro-Mags? Do you listen, like, have you like, are you into 108?" And I was like, I know about these bands, like I've heard of these bands, but like it wasn't when you could just like look up on YouTube and like find like listen to a band, like have someone be like, "Oh, do you like 108?" And you can like look them up on your phone and listen to them and like, "Oh yeah, I like this." Like it was like I had heard one Shelter song, you know. So for the longest time, I knew one Shelter song because it was on the In Flight compilation, the Revelation Records In Flight compilation, enough. And that's like to this day, that's like my favorite Shelter song. And it was just like you couldn't really like, I like wanted to listen to Krishnacore, but like I couldn't find it, you know. Like I would have to like go to the record store and just hope that like somehow there was, and it, like there was never any way to find out about it. But I always knew it was a thing, and there's all these like little moments, you know, like that I can look back on and be like, oh yeah, because like before 2015, you know, at some point I heard Cro-Mags, and I was like, yeah, this is cool. Like, I don't know what the big deal is. I'm not super into this. And then all of a sudden, at one point, I like woke up in 2013 and they were like my favorite band. I was like, oh, I get it. And it's like, you can look back and be like, oh, these are moments of like Krishna kind of like igniting these little light bulbs, you know? There's like meeting the devotee when I was 13. And then there was like the experience where I like went from being atheist to being agnostic. And then like a little ways down the road, it's like this moment where I'm like, oh, I understand Cro-Mags now. And so like, but that was like 2 years before I really like started connecting with devotees again and whatnot. But yeah, I feel like I keep going on these rants, like asking these really simple questions, but
No,
there's a lot, there's like,
yeah. And this is great. This is great, really. This is what I want to hear. I want to hear some of this. And I don't know if you guys know, but I'm kind of writing a book about Krishnacore as well. And I'm an academic, really. I'm a university lecturer over here in the UK. And so partly I'm doing this for my research, but partly because I'm really interested in it. And so hearing you guys talk about this is just great. I just love hearing your experience about how you come across Krishna, how you come across Krishnacore, and whether you were kind of believed in God before, and and I can understand that notion of the God fearing essence, because it's the same here. It's the same. I was brought up in a school where we feared God, and I just couldn't get it, and I was thinking, that's not a very good God, is it? Really, if we need to fear this person, and it was
so
only
that no gods, no masters. It's like that slogan is like everywhere in the punk world, and it's like it's really easy to accept, and I understand why people say that, but it's just like it's not true. Like maybe like you want to be an atheist, but you can't say that there's no masters, because it's like there's always higher powers. Like you're always like not. I appreciate that sentiment, but I don't think it's like realistic.
there's also there's that thing as well about punk, about punk is about being anti-establishment, and there is that element that if we, I'm wearing obviously wearing a Crass t-shirt, and Shudevi, who's Madhu's partner, she was wearing a Crass t-shirt, and she's a devotee, and she was wearing a Crass t-shirt on Instagram, and it's a great t-shirt. But right from the start, I suppose more really in kind of starting from Pill and religion onwards, punk has been anti-religion. And so if you are going to be punk and you're going to knock against the traditions and knock against the establishment, then to be really punk is to be pro-religion, because then now you're knocking against the establishment that is punk. That's the real thing to do. Be punk. I'm going to believe in God. Yeah.
I think I'm just thinking about that. Like, if it's punk to eventually like embrace religion, then it's just like punk like eating its own tail at that point. It's like punk butting heads with like the punk of the past, right? So like, therefore like the definition of punk is like you have to keep like redefining it, like by decade or like years or however long it goes, because at a certain point punk becomes an establishment,
right?
It's like a decades old establishment. So.
Yeah. And
that's why I always think it's funny to hear like punks be like accuse devotees of being in a cult, and it's like, well, punk is like a way bigger cult than Krishna consciousness. Everyone's like got the same uniform on, and if you like have like the wrong like amount of like studs on your punk vest, then it's like you get chastised or whatever. It's like
yeah. And it's interesting you say about it's starting to eat its own tail, because obviously I don't know if you know this, but that's what the Crass the Crass symbol's not there. The Crass symbol is is something eating its own tail. So it's really interesting, and to see it's, as you've said, punk really is kind of a cult in itself.
Like heavily scrutinized by the people involved too. Like, obviously not everyone's like this, but I think we've probably all ran into people who seem a little overly judgmental about like our physical appearance, or just like the costume, as you put it,
Yeah, it's like that cult is kind of based on like we are the body and we are our clothes, and our cult is based on we're not the body and not our clothes. So
There's been some, as we've all got older over here in the UK, it's been really interesting because back in the 1980s especially, you had Watty from The Exploited having arguments with Crass or Conflict, and Gary Bushaw, who's a writer over here that wrote specifically about Oi and Skinhead, really having a go at Crass and saying that Crass were just like these hippies. And now you're finding that once we've grown up a bit and we're all kind of in our 50s or our 60s, you're finding Watty from The Exploited is good friends with or friends with Steve Ignorant from Crass, and the same with Gary Bushell, and they've apologized and they've just made, because we're all a bit more grown up about it. And we've got, as you say, we've got over this idea of the body or what we're wearing comes first, really. What's good? So there you are. You're getting interested in Krishna consciousness. Could you tell us a little bit of the process about you becoming a devotee and you becoming initiated, for instance?
yeah, where to start with that? So basically, yeah, in 2015, I was like, got into running and doing triathlons, was like, went back to being vegan, went back to being like drug-free, alcohol-free, and was just like seeking, and at at a certain point, I just had to accept that Christian consciousness was like the philosophy that resonated the most with me, what was in Srila Prabhupada's books. And yeah, I mean, I when I was on tour during that decade from 2005 to 2015, I was like traveling around the world, and I would go to temples, I would go to restaurants. If I like was somewhere and I had some like free time and I knew there was like a devotee restaurant, I would like go there just because I knew they would have really great prasadam. And I kind of like would have kind of mixed experiences. We were actually just talking about this today because we were just at a temple like 2 days ago, and it was a big temple, and they had like a greeter. They had this woman, she was there, and she was like sitting in the lobby before you enter into the temple room, and she was like very like outgoing and just like, welcome to the temple, like, have you been here before, like, do you know where everything is, like showing us in the temple room, like the gift shop. And then she was like, and I had Lord Jagannath on my hoodie, and she was like, oh, and if you want to see Lord Jagannath, he's in this room, kind of like the secret room. And was just like really like friendly and engaging. And I had just had like kind of mixed experiences. Sometimes I would go to a temple and I would like see somebody and I would like go to like try to like, you know, introduce myself or just like try to figure out what was going on, and they would be like, run the other way, or like people are just like busy, trying to run the temple. And it's like, we're talking about how great that is. Like, we wish that like every temple had like someone who was there to kind of like be a point of contact for people coming in, because it's just like you have these like mixed experiences. And yeah, so honestly, like I had some of Srila Prabhupada's books and I was reading them, and I was back at my parents' house, and so I went to the temple. I went to a temple, and I had kind of an interesting experience that kind of made me feel a little bit like lost. Like I was like, I don't know if I can really connect here. It was a little cold, and I was a little like I was a little bummed about it.
What city was that in?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, you don't have to
I don't want to get into specifics.
Yeah.
But basically so I was like, I really want to like be a devotee. Like I want to like, but I don't know if I can hang out at this temple, because it was kind of like an off-putting experience. And And then I basically, like a few weeks after that, I was training for a triathlon, and I was at the swimming pool, and I was like walking towards the restroom, and then I see a guy walking towards me, and he has a Brahmin thread, and he has Tulsi on, and he has a Sika, and I was like, Hari Bol, and then he was like, Hari Krishna, like, who are you? And we introduced ourselves, and then he was like, yeah, we have these home programs, like, you should come. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then like he picked me up 2 days later and brought me to this home program where I had a completely opposite experience. Everyone was very warm. um they were like cool with me being vegan, which had been like a thing that I'd experienced some weird like pushback with, like sometimes going to temples, like if you're vegan and you're like asking if something's vegan, it's like, like we don't really, yeah. So basically, like I was at this home program, and like all the prashadam was like vegan, or they were just like very accommodating. They're like, oh yeah, like that's cool, you're vegan, like okay, so I won't give you this, but most of the stuff here is vegan. It was just like a lot of devotees, and it was like an amazing kirtan, and so basically like that's when I learned that there were, and they were all disciples of Narayan Maharaj, and that's when I learned that there were Hare Krishnas outside of ISKCON, and um, that was like kind of my initial kind of connection. For the next like 4 months or so, I would go to those home programs. Just had a really like, just it really like solidified. I was like, this is definitely like where I should be. And then I ended up moving to Palo Alto, California for a little while, and going to the ISKCON of Silicon Valley, and kind of connected with that community, and yeah, and met Vaisheshika Prabhu and Nakula, and yeah, went there for like 6 months, and just really enjoyed hearing from them. And then kind of traveled around, went to Mexico City for a while. Um, I've just been traveling my whole life, so just a lot of traveling. And then 2019, I was living in Denver, and had between like 2016 and 2019 had been steadily traveling, definitely like trying to cultivate some bhakti, and definitely having like, I was like, that was like the most hardcore like vegan. That's like when I got vegan tattooed across my throat. I was just like ultra militant, like vegan, and would not like back down about it. And that resulted in a lot of, not a lot, but a few incidents of like tension between me and the devotees. And I was trying to be a devotee, but I also was trying to stick to veganism very like staunchly. And at the Denver temple, the Sunday feast was fully vegan, and the temple restaurant was fully vegan. And I was like, oh, like there's an ISKCON temple in the world where it's fully vegan, and everyone's like down with that, and it's okay. It's like, because I was having some doubts. I was like, I don't know if I can actually be like get initiated and like be a devotee if I want to maintain my veganism. And then I was like, oh, I guess it's possible. Like this whole community is like totally embracing it, and they're like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Like you want to be vegan, like that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And it was really like amazing to hear like a whole community, and like the temple president's like giving a Sunday feast, and he's like mentioning the Animal Liberation Front like during the feast. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble. But he was just like, he was like speaking about, it was like the first time I've ever been to a temple, and like the temple president's giving a lecture, and then he's like mentioning the Animal Liberation Front, and I was like, dude, this is like amazing. Like what? And
In the temple at Houston was all vegan.
temple restaurant in Houston for vegan too. So that was kind of like 2019 was when I was like like I said, there's like these little moments like that you can look back on and be like, okay, this is like when this happened, and it's like it was like all like perfectly arranged by Krishna. Like Krishna like was like brought me to Denver into a community of devotees who are like totally cool. And then like, yeah, I mean, basically then I got initiated about 2 years later. Um it well I took Harinam. I took Harinam in ISKCON about 2 years later. And then most recently took I was in Vrindavan and about 3 weeks ago I took Diksha from Satyanarayan Das Babaji into the Gadadhar Parivar. So that's like a whole there's I mean, yeah, you say like you want to talk about initiation, and it's like I don't know which initiation you want to talk about, or this has been like it's like I could talk at length about any of these topics, and yeah, I have a lot to say about all of it.
No, that's great. That's great. Thank you. And the band. So as I know we've been talking in Messenger and like Instagram, and before I kind of press record on this, I was talking to you about your influences taking me back, and getting me to listen to some bands. I've got a list of them, what you've said here, but it's great, just to get me back into listening to Bolt Thrower, which was a real blast, and Celtic Frost as well. And I never really liked them back in the day. I thought they were a bit kind of like, Celtic Frost. I thought, oh, it's a bit metally for me, because I was really into my crust and narco punk. But I found out that they had sorry.
Stenchcore.
Yeah. This,
like Sore Throat and like all those bands.
Yeah, so I was more kind of into them. I think my wife's got some vinyl downstairs of Celtic Frost. She liked to kind of crossover stuff, and but I was listening to Celtic Frost this afternoon, thinking, "Oh, these are really good. These are." And so, could you talk a little bit about really your influences? Because you're the only. I mean, would you call the band Krishnacore, or would you call it something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the closest thing that I've seen that kind of I don't know describes us the best is like someone described us as industrial Krishnacore, which like I mean, I guess like that's probably the best description, but we're not like I don't know if we're like really able to be like because you have like a song. Well, there's a song that's about to come out in 2 days called Vishnu's Rays. That's like heavy. It's like super heavy. But then you have a song like All Glory Sarada Kund, and it's like that's like a fun song. It's not like a Celtic Frost song.
No.
So it's kind of hard to say like I think like I would say most of our songs are lean more towards that.
Sorry, I lost you. We lost the volume there. You said that one particular song was more kind of Celtic Frost.
There's a song called Vishnu's Rays that's about to come out.
Yeah.
And I was just saying that most of our songs I think would be described as industrial Krishnacore. Like the ones that would be like kind of outliers. I think, yeah, right.
Yeah, I think industrial Krishnacore is probably the closest thing that I've heard as well too.
Yeah.
I guess because we just have like we have like heavy guitars in a lot of songs, but also like electronic elements and like electronic beats and stuff. And I think that just harkens back to a lot of like industrial bands, you know.
And how do you think? I mean, how do you think you sit then with the other kind of Krishnacore bands? Do you think you could ever kind of perform with someone like Shelter, for instance?
We'd love to play a show with Shelter. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I mean, for a while, the drummer from Nausea was in Shelter for like a tour.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, that it's not like we're the first ones to have that like intermingling of like crust and Krishnacore, you know? And yeah, I mean, I think, and like Raj Kishore, like I believe he's on record like citing some industrial bands as influences on him. And when I've emailed with him, like, you know, he's heard our whole record that's about to come out, and he's like, you know, the things that he's saying that he's hearing, and it's like he's like citing like industrial bands. So it's like, I mean, I think, yeah, I think we would fit. I think our live show, I mean, we have a live drummer. Jordan plays guitar live. So I think visually it wouldn't be that jarring for people to like see us on a bill with like a 108 or.
Yeah, we like look like a band.
We look like a band, yeah. It would be really, I mean, I would love to play. We played a show with Godhead, Back to Godhead now, they're called, but we played a couple shows with them, and that's been really awesome. And yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great to have like a bill of like all the Krishnacore bands. Yeah, so I think we would fit in. But also, I mean, when I was doing the noise stuff, I was touring. I did a tour with this band Hoax that was like a bigger hardcore band at the time that I did the tour with them. And that was great. I mean, it was 2012. So although there's a history of like noise and industrial interacting with like punk and hardcore, I think like it isn't until like the past like 2 or 3 years that the larger like punk world has really accepted like noise and industrial on a large scale. So back then it was like pretty like people were like, what, like to Hoax, they're like, you guys are touring with like this weird like synth noise guy, like what are you guys doing? But then they would like see it and it would work, you know. And it's like the things there, it's not that different. I mean, the spirit is like the same.
What do you mean by the spirit?
Just like the energy, you know, and like the yeah, I mean, just like the spirit of the music, like
also maybe like the attitude,
the like, yeah, like the qualities, I guess. The attitude for sure. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, you know, like just because we're like we have like drum machines, you know, and another Krishnacore band might not have any like electronic elements, like we're still doing it for the same reasons, and we're still yeah, I think that's what matters more than like the instrumentation or like any kind of label you would put on it, you know. Because it's not like Krishnacore has like, it's not like Krishnacore is a defined sound necessarily either. Like within Krishnacore, there's like a band like Prema, who like their second record is like an emo record. And then, you know, there's like a band like Shelter who they have like a ska song. And then there's like a band like 108 who's like dark and brooding for the most part. You know, it's like it's not like a Krishnacore is like it's a nice word because it's like pretty all encompassing. It's yeah, I really like that word.
It's like, correct me if I'm wrong or if you disagree, but it's like the same spirit just manifesting itself in different ways. It's it's all like extreme heavy music, I guess would be like the similarity. But it's all like
actually
communicating the same goal.
we're actually a Radharani core.
Radharani core. That is fantastic. Because you know, in your influences, you do talk about Prema. You do mention Prema and 108, and I think, you know, you're talking about a band like Prema. I think they're just so underrated. They're just absolutely fantastic.
Totally. Yeah.
And we're trying to get the guys from Prema to do one of these, but we can't quite get hold of them. But for me, Prema and 108 were my favourite kind of Krishnacore kind of bands.
They're like, there's like a grittiness. You know? They have some grit. Like,
Yeah. And I think that's, I'm not just saying this because you're here, but I think that's what you've got. You've got that kind of, that grittiness. You've got that. And do you know, how much does some, like, for instance, I've got the lyrics up here of All Glories to Radha Kund. You know, how important is it for you to sing about Krishna within your style, within your songs?
it's like of the utmost importance, but also sometimes like the lyrics aren't so like on the nose. Or, like All Glories to Radha Kund just like came to me, and it just like spilled out onto the page, and it's like very like, there's like, I mean, those lyrics are just very direct and like just saying what they're saying. And sometimes like I think it can be, it's the lyrics that I write might be more like abstract or something. But I mean, it's always like, I don't think we're ever gonna like switch up the content of the songs to be like about something else that's like unrelated to bhakti, you know.
And is there, with other Krishnacore bands, like, you know, I've just been interviewed guy from Standard, Satya-Brata Das, and also Krishna Das from Invocation. That, especially with Invocation, you know, they sort of, they publish their lyrics. But I found it really difficult to find some lyrics of yours.
Really?
And like on Bandcamp, who else would we just, the guy from Nevin as well, who's a Siberian Krishnacore, and they put their lyrics on Bandcamp, and I had to get Google Translate to translate it for me. But I was on Bandcamp and I was thinking, hey, can I grab some of your lyrics? But they're not there.
Oh.
And
I'm not good at the internet stuff, but yeah, I mean, we can get into the lyrics. You actually wrote me about that, and I think I spaced on sending you lyrics. But if there's like specific songs you want to talk about or lyrics,
well, I was just going to ask you if you could go through, just pick a specific song and just talk to us about it, and why you wrote it in the way that you did, and why the lyrics are written in that special, in that specific way, you know. Your mic keeps on cutting out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
This isn't our setup. We're like in my stepdad's office right now.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's okay now. I can hear you.
Yeah. I mean, I could do Seek a Flame, which is like a song that's not out yet. We had a video for it that was out for a little bit, but that's coming.
Yeah,
out.
sure. Is that the one that you did in a jungle style as well?
Yeah, there's a jungle remix. Yeah,
which is great.
The lyrics to that one are, "One the Sika is a flame, 2 light up the holy name, 3 just chant it every day, 4 regs to guide the way. You think that you're not lost, you think that you're winning, put Jesus on the cross so you can keep sinning. Thou shalt not kill does not apply to you, apparently. 4 principles, it's not that hard to swallow. You've got 10 commandments you don't even follow. In the morning when I chant my rounds, my consciousness is purified by the sound. Yeah, I mean, that was inspired by, that was mostly inspired by the interview that Srila Prabhupada had with Cardinal Danalu it's published in the Science of Self-Realization, where basically he's kind of just bringing up this point about like thou shalt not kill. It's like in the Bible, and I mean, I think it's safe to say probably a majority of the Christians are eating meat. And he's like, well, why is this? And it's just kind of it's like I have this like huge pet peeve about like people pointing fingers at others and like being accusatory and critical and then not really having their own stuff kind of like resolved. Like, you know, just the attitude of like you have to accept Jesus, you have to accept all this, and it's like you don't even accept it. Like you're telling people they have to like accept Jesus Christ, but you're not even accepting thou shalt not kill. So how can you like be so accusatory and critical of people when it's like you're not even following your own commandments? And then people will be like, oh, like you have these like 4 regulative principles, or like you have these yamas and niyamas, or like whatever, like you have these austerities you have to do. And it's like, yeah, we have like, I mean, depending on like what sangha you're initiated in, like generally there's like 4 things that devotees don't do. And it's like, well, like Christians have 10 things that they're not supposed to do. So it's like, what's, but it's like, you know, you have 10 things, but like majority of you like aren't even following those. So, I mean, I think it's kind of like just like stay in your own lane, like be concerned with like yourself and like what you're doing rather than like pointing fingers at other people and like accusing them. And that's something that I've witnessed within the devotee community as well that really irks me. And I had a lot to do with like my recent taking Diksha outside of the organization that I was a part of previously. It's just, I don't think that like, I think that we need to just like focus on our own personal relationship with God and not like be critical of others, especially when we don't have our own stuff like under control. You know, it's like, so for Christians to be accusing people of going to hell or like they need to accept Jesus, it's like, well, I mean, maybe you should start with yourself. Like maybe you should accept thou shalt not kill and be vegetarian or vegan. The Bible has plenty of verses about veganism. You know, in Genesis, there's like verses in there about like how God has provided all the seed-bearing fruits. He doesn't say, I've given you all these animals to slaughter and like eat their dead bodies. Like it doesn't say that, you know. The word like broma was translated to meat, you know, and broma in Greek just means food. But when it was translated into English, people in England were using the term meat to refer to like all food, from my understanding. And it was just like this catch-all term. So the word broma got translated to meat. It's like, if you go back, I mean, it's like, people want to be like, oh, well, we've been eating meat for like thousands of years. And it's like, you can always go back farther than that. You can always like, you can be like, yeah, we've been eating meat for thousands of years, but like, what about before that? Like, you only want to go back far enough to prove your point. That doesn't even prove your point because it's like, you're being like dishonest. And it's kind of just, I mean, that song is just about, yeah, it's about that. It's about like kind of my own like upbringing within Catholicism and just like my newfound spiritual path, and why I just feel like it's makes way more sense and is more truthful, I guess.
And so, how does being a devotee then inform you as a performer on stage?
It makes me not want to. It makes me not want to perform. I mean, like that's like something that we've been like grappling with on this tour. It's because like I made that conscious decision to stop performing in 2015, and a lot of it was just because it's like I don't want to be hanging out in dark clubs. I don't want to be like in these environments. And yeah, like the past, we played 2 shows, and it's like they've been great shows, and the crowds have been awesome, and like everyone involved in the shows has been great, but it's just like we go there and it just reinforces like, yeah, this is not what I want to be doing with my life. Like I don't like Krishna's put me in this position because like maybe like I can reach some people that otherwise wouldn't accept, you know, a spiritual path or something like that. But for me, it's like an austerity for sure. Like performing, it's not like I'm not like stoked to go play a show. You know, it's kind of like just what we have to do right now. Because I like to go to bed early and get rest and wake up at a decent time. And
that being said, though, you're still giving it like 3,000% when you perform. Like
by your estimate,
I don't want people to think that you're like phoning it in. You're still like going insane, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm still performing, but it's more about like that, like being an aspiring devotee, and my attitude about being in like a place that's just like full of like tamas and rajas. It's like, and there's like even practical things, like we have books out on our table, and I have like little boxes of Radha Kuntilak, and like we have deities on our shirts, and it's like, you know, it's like I don't want people like blowing weed smoke around or like setting a beer like on like a Bhaktivinoda Thakur book or something like that. Like that's like, so that was like a conversation we started to have this morning. I was like, I don't know like where to draw the line, because I definitely do not want to be offensive, but it's also like, I mean, what do we do? Like, how do you? It's an interesting thing to try to navigate, especially being that we're like this industrial Krishnacore band, because it has us playing shows that normally I don't think the Krishnacore band would be playing. Like we played last night with like it's all synth bands. It's all like EBM, like electronic body music or whatever.
Yeah,
you know, and it's like that's not like a show Shelter's going to be playing. Like normally, like a Krishnacore band is probably playing like a straight edge show at least, so it's not like people are going to be blowing weed smoke all over their merchandise or like setting beers down.
We were playing a show with like so much fog machine that you couldn't see your hand in your face. Like that kind of show.
It's like strobe lights and fog and like really heavy beats and just like I don't know, like super serious, like dark wave or whatever. It's just like, yeah, I mean, so that's, I guess that kind of goes back to your previous question about like how we would put on a bill with 108. It's like we would much rather play with like Invocation and like Back to Godhead and 108, you know, instead of, you know, with like synth bands. But we do I mean, we love like synth music and stuff. Like, don't get us wrong.
Yeah,
it's just like
it was an amazing
it's just an interesting like Krishna's like made some interesting thing here where it's like, okay, he like wants he wants like someone to be able to connect with like this totally other underground, you know, world, and it's like, I guess that's us right now. But it's just like an interesting thing. Like I don't know. It's just interesting. It's kind of funny.
So Mardu was telling me when he saw Shelter in Berlin that there were a few Krishnacore guys there, and they had kirtan before the gig. And I don't know if you know Sober, over in Russia, and they're really and they have a kind of they have kind of a bhajan before playing proper. And you hear about these gigs where there's Prashadam there and kirtan. Is this not something that perhaps you could do then in an industrial gig?
Definitely. You know? I mean, it was the show that we played in New Orleans a couple nights ago. The promoter was trying to get it booked at the Krishna Temple in New Orleans. Like it was about to be there. Like we were about to have the show there. And then like
got moved to a skate park.
For whatever reason, like yeah, I mean it's like I was a little like, I don't know, like I want to do this. It sounds cool, but I'm also like, I don't know, like I don't want to like, you know, bewilder like the devotees, you know, at the Christian temple. But like, it would be cool, and like we would definitely love to do that at some point. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think like I was thinking about trying to have some kirtan at the show last night because I'm like, oh, I have a harmonium, which is like an analog synthesizer or an acoustic synthesizer, you know?
Oh yeah.
Maybe like the synth crowd would be into that, but I mean, I think it's better off that I didn't try to do that. But I think like, yeah, I mean, if it made sense and if we could get it together, like, yeah, we would like to do that. Yeah, I tried to reach out to devotees like before. We're just doing 4 shows right now. And I tried to connect with some devotees beforehand to try to arrange something like that, but it just, I don't think it worked. I don't think it's happening in any of the places that we're playing. But yeah, I mean, that would be cool. Yeah, we'd love to do that.
That would be great, wouldn't it? I think that would be brilliant. And so I know it's going to come all the way from the US, but I've just ordered your cassette. And the Double Saturn's Last Purification Exercise, it's called, isn't it? Can you talk a little bit about that? Why is it called that? I've had to, at my age, that I forget things very easily. I had to have it written down here. Double Saturn's Last Purification, and I was thinking it's a Double Saturn Returns, but
yeah, I mean, originally it was going to be called Only Demons Can Dine on the Flesh of the Dead, which is a line from a 108 song. But I don't know. I mean, through the process of like recording the record, like making it, we spent 3 years working on this record. Over 3 years, actually. One of the songs is from 2016. And it just kind of, this like theme kept coming up for me personally, where like I was in my Shani Mahadash and my Shani Antardash, Vedic astrology, Jyotish. And you know, that's Saturn. That's the planet Saturn. And she's like feared, you know, people are like, oh, like, you know, you better like watch out. You're going into Saturn, like your Saturn Mahadash, like the next like whatever, I think it's like 19 years, 17 years, something like that, 16 years maybe. But it's gonna be like harsh. And so there's been a lot of lessons that I've been like learning. And the record was originally coming out around the time that I was leaving the Mahadash and Antardash and going into Saturn Mercury. So it was like these are like my last few months of Saturn. And yeah, I mean, last purification exercises, like some heavy stuff went down in like my personal life that was like, if I didn't have some sort of like spiritual orientation, could have definitely like wrecked me, you know. And so just kind of stressing the importance of having that sadhana and that shelter, you know, of Shri Guru and the Vaishnavas, and how we can see these like so-called reversals as like actually they're just purification, you know. And it was just like coming out of the double Saturn period, there were just, I was like, oh, these are like the last purification exercises. and the songs were somewhat born from those experiences, or at least worked on during that time. So it's kind of like just a way of referring to the time and the things that occurred within that time period.
And you listen to Andre Prabhu as well. Have you got a what's the word? Have you got a kind of a link to him? Do you find him inspirational?
Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, he's amazing. I am scared to talk about him because I don't want to commit any offenses, you know, like it's just like he's just, yeah, he's the best, you know? He's and from what I know about him, from what I've heard like secondhand from people that were close to him, it's like this is like where I'm on the verge of committing offenses, but I feel like he really had like a punk attitude, you know, like he was like just he was doing his own thing, quote unquote, but he was like totally in alignment with like, you know, with Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Like he wasn't doing his own thing in a way that was like creating his own thing. He was like doing his own thing, but staying within the context of Gaudiya Vaishnavism and not like straying and not deviating at all, which like is hard to do. But he had the spirit. Like he's like, I mean, and he was like challenging, but he was like respectful when he was challenging the status quo. And that's something that we ought to be doing more, I think. Is just like, I talk about being afraid to commit offenses, and I think that keeps people from really like being an individual and challenging the status quo when it needs to be challenged. And he was fearless about that. You know, if you read his book, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's like whoa. And like he's like saying this stuff that sounds really heavy, but he's referencing Shastra. Like the way that he's speaking, he's referencing Shastra. He's referencing like the way that people are speaking. Like when he's like saying like to hell with like, you know, the Lakshmi points, to hell with it's like that's referencing like the story of like the Brahmins and the wives of the Brahmins, like, you know, when they like realized that they like messed up and they had direct like darshan of Krishna and Balaram and the Gopas, and like they could have like given them some like remnants of the yagya, and then they went to the wives of the Brahmins, and the wives of the Brahmins were like so ready to serve and ready to feed the, you know, Krishna, Balaram, and the Gopas. And it's like the Brahmins realized like, oh, we're doing all of these rituals and we're like not even actually like, when we have a chance to like, you know, exercise bhakti, we're like not even doing it because we're just like so concerned with, you know, get away like little kid, like I'm trying to do this like yoga, and it's like you're missing the point. And so then he's like writing, he's like to hell with all, and it's like I just think like, I mean, yeah, Iyendra's like he's doing his own thing, but he's totally in alignment with like he's just incredible. He's like he's just I don't know. And then the whole thing with like the temple that he made like in the bread truck in New York, and like driving around having the mobile temple. It's like, dude, like, yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah. I would say he's definitely like somebody that I try to take some guidance from, and just try to serve, you know, through our music. And we just want to whenever like people from the punk community ask me like what I'm listening to now, I'm always like, you need to check out. I'm listening to Kirtan, like I'm listening to, and then I'm like, yeah, there's this guy Ayendra, like he's amazing. If you listen to his recordings, like the way that he's recording, even it's like in a punk style. I really like. I hope like this isn't being taken like offensively or in any way disrespectful, but it's like he's doing all these like super creative like recording techniques, and he's like splicing in like the sounds of Vrindavan like with his kirtan, and it's like his kirtan, like his recordings have that grit and like that experimentation, you know, and it's just everything about him I just like I love.
I don't think that's offensive. I think you're right. Yeah.
Because it's like I there's like a fine line between like kind of glorifying him and then like comparing him to some like mundane music or something. Like I don't want to be reducing what he did or what he continues to do, or like put it in the same box as like, you know, like a punk band or something, because it's like so far above that.
Yeah, can understand. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. What's going to be next? Are you going to continue touring, even though you don't want to, or you don't feel it's right? Although it sounds as if you're doing a good job. So,
I mean, yeah, it's not. We're game for whatever like situation we get put in with our band. I think. Right? Yeah. Like it'd be fun to tour more and stuff. I just think like we have to be cautious and just aware of like the types of shows that we want to play, but sometimes it's like you don't really have a choice. Like you can't, like beggars can't be choosy. So it's not like at the forefront of my mind like playing shows. I'm not like super concerned with trying to get shows or anything like that. But if somebody's like, hey, we want you to play this, and it sounds like it's like in alignment with our values and it's going to be like a fun thing to do, then why not? Like we'll do it. It's just not something that we're like seeking out actively. Like the dream would be like to do a tour with like Back to Godhead and Invocation, like Antimaterial Worlds, Invocation, and Back to Godhead. Do like some kind of tour with those bands. That would be, I feel like that would be great. And yeah, I mean, in terms of what's next, we have this record coming out, and then we're gonna work on some music. I'm gonna go to the Dom for a while, and live there. At the end of the month, I'm leaving to go to Vrindavan, back to Vrindavan, and I think Jordan's gonna come over there, and we're gonna work on some music there hopefully for like a month or something. He can come and we can work on some music there in the Dom. Sure. But I mean, yeah, who knows what's gonna come of the band, but I think the next music, like sonically, is gonna pull more from projects like Aphex Twin and Burial and some kind of more like down tempo stuff.
Bowery
Electric, Curve, like kind of like like that era of like 90s electronic music and like trip hop and that type of stuff. And definitely more like sound collage, like field recordings that we make like in Vrindavan. I think that would be fun to do something like that. But I think at the core, we're a Krishnacore band for sure, no matter what we do.
Incredible. Are you the new, the Krishnacore industrial Krishnacore? That's it. You're industrial. And I think Balarama Das from M4S is over in Vrindavan at the moment. Your mic dropped out again.
I just said I'd love to connect with him.
Yeah, I know that I've interviewed him a few times. I got so much respect for him. He's just incredible. And is there any, as we come to the end, is there anything else you'd like to say to wrap it up? You've dropped out again. Sorry. No.
Okay.
That's better. I can hear. I can.
You hear? Okay.
Yeah,
I want
yeah.
to say, thank you. Thanks for this interview. It was great.
Yeah.
Great meeting you.
Thanks to all the devotees for listening to my sideways rants, and thanks for tolerating.
It's great. I mean, I'm not a devotee. You know, obviously Madhu is, but I'm not. And I always find you guys just inspirational. And I wear the beads, and you can see, you know, I read a lot, and so, but it's always great just hearing from devotees and non-devotees actually saying that, but you know, that play this kind of music. So thank you. It's been great. You dropped out again.
We just really appreciate it.
But yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Yeah, I mean, what you do is brilliant. Your music is absolutely fantastic. Really good. And no, again, you've dropped out. But my wife said that you sound a little bit like Cabaret Voltaire.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Now that's like a wow. That's you know, this blimey, that is a real kind of what's it compliment, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know. So right, I'm gonna go and drink tea. It's about 10:15 at night here. So yeah, like you, I need to get into bed early. But thank you very much. Thank you. Hare Krishna.